All right, let's dive into one of the most famous and maybe one of the most misunderstood stories in the entire Bible, the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. It's one of those stories you've probably heard, but there is so much going on just beneath the surface. So the story kicks off with this incredibly vivid picture of wealth. I mean, you can almost see it, right? Pure luxury, comfort, total excess. But what's really going on here? What is this story actually trying to tell us about money, about faith, and about the kind of life we choose to live?
It's really easy to just jump to that conclusion. Rich guy bad, poor guy good. But the source material argues this is a much, much deeper warning. It was actually aimed specifically at the money-loving Pharisees of the time, and it was meant to challenge their whole worldview, especially their belief that having a lot of wealth was a sign of God's blessing.
Okay, so to really get this, we have to start with the two main characters. And, wow, their lives could not be more different. The parable sets up this immediate, incredibly powerful contrast right from the get-go. So on one side, you've got this rich man dressed in purple and fine linen. And you have to understand, that purple dye, it was insanely expensive back then. This is the attire of royalty, of the super elite. Then, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have Lazarus. And he's not just poor, he's sick, covered in sores, physically in agony. And this stark difference defined their day-to-day lives. For the rich man, this extravagant feasting wasn't his special occasion. It was his normal, his every single day. Meanwhile, poor Lazarus wasn't even asking for a place at the table. He was just hoping for the scraps, the crumbs that fell on the floor. And here is where we find a really crucial detail. The source points out that the rich man, the one with all the status, a descendant of Abraham, he doesn't even get a name. It's like in the grand scheme of things, he's forgotten. But Lazarus, the man forgotten by everyone on earth, his name is recorded forever. And his name, Lazarus, literally means God has helped. How powerful is that? But, as you might guess, death is not the end of the story. In fact, it's where everything gets flipped on its head. It's the beginning of a great reversal, where their fortunes are completely and permanently switched. The tables have totally turned. The one who lived in agony is now at peace, and the one who lived in luxury is now in torment. And get this, from his place of suffering, the rich man looks up and can actually see the very beggar he ignored every single day now being comforted. And Abraham's words to the rich man are, well, they're chilling. They hammer home the finality of it all. There are no do-overs, no second chances. This great chasm between them is fixed. It's permanent. The choices they made on earth created an eternal state that cannot be changed. So this brings us to the big question, right? What was the rich man's actual sin? The source argues it wasn't simply being wealthy. I mean, the Bible's full of faithful people who had great wealth. No, his problem was something much, much deeper. According to this interpretation, that whole feasting thing, it was a metaphor for his entire life. It was a life of complete self-indulgence. He took every single resource God had given him, not just his money, but his time, his health, his opportunities, and squandered it all on himself. And here's the real kicker. Lazarus wasn't just some random beggar. He was a divine opportunity. God literally placed a chance to do his work, to show compassion, to use those abundant resources for something beyond himself right there on his doorstep. By ignoring Lazarus, the rich man wasn't just ignoring a man in need, he was rejecting God's call on his life. And this brings us to the final and maybe the most powerful part of the whole story. Because even in his torment, the rich man still thinks he knows best. He makes his one last desperate plea to try and warn his family. He's basically saying, send Lazarus back from the dead. If my 5 brothers see a spectacular miracle like that, something undeniable, then for sure they'll change their ways. But Abraham's response just hits so hard. It's the core message of the entire parable. He says they already have everything they need. They have the scriptures, God's word. And then he says if they won't listen to that, they wouldn't be convinced even if someone rose from the dead. Wow. So the proof of genuine faith isn't about waiting for some big, flashy miracle. It's about acting on the truth you already have. It's about listening to God's word and actually letting it change how you live, how you see the people in need around you, and how you use the resources you've been given. And that, it leaves us with a pretty challenging question to reflect on. If the parable teaches that faith is ultimately proven by our actions and our obedience to what we already know is true, well, what are our actions proving?